There are some pieces of media that seem so simple and innocent on the surface, yet turn out to have multiple dark layers that reveal themselves one by one. I heard about the game Omori, some people saying it was one of the best games they had ever played, which got me interested. Psychological horror is normally not my cup of tea, but the high praise for this game convinced me to play it, and I was treated to a story that was equal parts horror and heart. By the way, this video will contain major spoilers for the game's story, so I recommend not watching the video until you've completed the game. We begin the story in White Space, a section of the wider Headspace, and a boy named Omori. He is in an empty space by himself until a door opens that leads him to his friends Kel, Aubrey, Hiro, Basil, and Mari, the latter being his older sister. The space is one of childlike innocence, and any conflict that arises never has any serious or lasting consequences. It's definitely a place where one would be tempted to stay for a while. I found the game's emotion system to be particularly interesting, and I can understand how it works with certain emotions being dominant over others. Anger is a stronger feeling than sadness, becoming sad can disrupt a happy mood, and it's hard to remain angry when something makes you happy. Almost immediately, however, Omori himself stands out from his friends and the rest of Headspace. He is in black and white rather than color, almost never smiles, and uses an actual knife as a weapon rather than something like a ball or stuffed toy. A game over only occurs when Omori has lost all of his heart points, even if the other members of the party have not yet become toast. The only way to exit White Space and subsequently Headspace is for Omori to stab himself. We then meet Sunny, Omori's real-world counterpart outside Headspace. Sunny's reality is distinct from the innocence of Headspace, as he seems to be haunted by something and his fears manifest plainly in the world around him, if only as illusions or hallucinations. Once we learn of other realities of Sunny's life, it's easy to see why he would want to escape to Headspace. In the real world, his older sister Mari is dead, and the remainder of his friend group is not what it once was, most notably with Aubrey having deliberately removed herself from it. Sunny seems to harbor some particular guilt about Mari's death, although we don't yet know why. As we enter Headspace again, we can see reason for the differences it displays from Sunny's waking life. Not only is Mari still alive in Headspace, but she never becomes involved in any combat and thus is never in any danger, always watching from the safety of her picnic blanket. Most notably, however, Sunny is not himself in Headspace, instead being taken over by his counterpart, Omori. Throughout the story, it becomes clearer and clearer why Sunny isn't himself in Headspace, because the guilt he feels does not align with the innocence and carefree environment of that world. At the same time, however, that childlike innocence is something that Sunny deeply desires to be able to return to, because it reminds him of the period of his life where Mari was alive, his friend group was together, and he was not consumed by guilt. More than anything, Headspace is a means of escapism from his reality and even from himself, and Omori is something of a blank slate for him. One aspect of Omori the character that I found intriguing was his name, which does seem to have a few different layers to its meaning. My first thought was that it could be derived from the Latin phrase memento mori, remember you must die. It's definitely a reference to the social phenomenon of a hikikomori, or a young person who has chosen to isolate themselves from society to an extreme degree, as Sunny has seemingly become one. In universe, the name Omori comes from the brand of piano that Mari once played, and the fact that Omori himself appears in black and white could be reflective of the piano's keys. Since Sunny is the actual protagonist, the game Omori is an example of media named for a character other than the lead. Omori is still significant enough to have the story named after him, as he is the lens through which the player experiences Headspace, and he ultimately drives the overall plot to its climax and conclusion. Each person who was affected by Mari's death dealt with it in their own way. In the case of her friends, Kel and Hiro tried to focus on other things, while Sunny and Basil withdrew into themselves. This left Aubrey feeling alienated, as though she was not only left to bear her grief over Mari alone, but also as though she was the only one who was deeply affected by losing Mari. This eventually led her to become friends with the Hooligans, which ironically made that friend group a total of 6, just like her old friend group when Mari was still alive. Aubrey took out her anger on others by bullying them, only feeling remorse when directly confronted with how much it hurt the victims. As for Mari's family members, her father seems to have left Sunny and his mother. Sunny's mother likely made the decision for the two of them to move away because their old house reminds them of Mari and no longer feels like a home to them. Sunny has already chosen to isolate himself, and whether that pattern continues depends on the player choosing to open the door for Kel and hang out with him on the days leading up to the move. This makes the game diverge into the so-called Sunny route and Omori route. The designations fit because Sunny is able to become himself again with the help of his friends, but Omori represents the part of him that only wants to push others away. Basil in particular is so affected by Mari's death that it affects his Headspace counterpart, finding its way into a place otherwise separate from the woes of the real world. Similar to Omori, he develops a negative counterpart simply known as Stranger. We later learn that this happens because Basil and Sunny are the only ones who know the truth about Mari's death and have been hiding the dark secret between them for multiple years. The true manner of her death also explains how Sunny's fear tends to manifest as long staircases. His fears also take the shape of spiders, reminiscent of the spider on his shoulder that once led him to jump into the lake where he nearly drowned. Sunny seems to have been thinking more about death since losing Mari, and also experiences suicidal ideation, no longer wishing to be saved from death as he was that day. I admire the way the game's narrative gets both deeper and darker as we go along. One moment that struck me was the disembodied and unidentified voice in Deeper Well, implying that the inhabitants of Headspace had souls and were conscious, supposedly suffering under Omori's command of them. In the real world, Sunny sees visions of Mari in his house multiple times, and whether it's really her spirit or another one of his hallucinations is sort of left up to interpretation. There is, of course, the moment where Hiro supposedly hears her playing the piano, suggesting that it really was her. I also like the parallel between Mari saving Sunny from drowning when they were younger, and Sunny attempting to save Basil in the same way when Aubrey pushes him into the lake, even if they both had to be rescued by Hiro. Of course, the most powerful moments of the narrative transpire when Sunny finally must face the truth about Mari's death. I found the sequence of him walking through the darkened house and finding photographs of the incident somewhat reminiscent of the birthplace memory in Hollow Knight and equally as memorable. The memories being in the form of photographs is a reference to Basil's photo album, but I wonder if it could also be alluding to the phenomenon of flashbulb memories or particularly vivid recollections of intense emotional moments. There is also the choice of whether to save Basil, with the only two options being a physical fight between him and Sunny or Basil's suicide. In the case of the former, both boys' somethings have manifested so plainly that they are almost akin to reality, and both are made to believe that a physical fight is the only way to defeat them. Even at this point, the true culmination of the narrative is still yet to come. I loved the Memory Lane section of the story, taking place on a literal road with the memories themselves appearing in streetlights, and the entire thing is a metaphor for life and the bright moments throughout. It's interesting how attempting to leave a particular memory results in being prompted about whether you actually want to leave, because in real life, when we reminisce, it can be hard to take ourselves out of that mindset and back into the present progression of time. I liked how what Sunny takes away from each memory is something sensory related for all 5 senses. At the end comes the inevitable fight between Sunny and Omori, and the fact that the battle itself is impossible to win, but the way Sunny rids himself of Omori's influence for good is allowing himself to do the one thing he never got to do: play his duet with Mari. I think this is another instance where it may actually be Mari's spirit with Sunny instead of an illusion. Omori is a complex story, but there are some definitive themes, messages, and takeaways to be gleaned from it. There is certainly a theme of things not lasting forever and dealing with change, and the subsequent wish to escape from reality when things get difficult. The plot demonstrates how it's always better to face things than try to repress them, because they will otherwise come to light on their own in all the worst ways. It's also a reminder that we can't always change what happens to us in life, but we can choose how we respond to it and the kind of person it makes us into. Even if we've chosen wrong before, we can always make up for it if we put in the effort to set things right. We always have others on our side, and we just have to reach out to them and accept them when they reach out to us. So what do you think of Omori? What other themes can you find in its narrative? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to check out my channel to see if any of my other videos interest you. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.